Greetings, Earthlings. I'm Marshall Weber. Sadly, my co host Monica Johnson is taking the day off, but this is still Brooklyn Calling. Hello, welcome to our show where we talk about all things artists, books, libraries, and social justice. I'm an artist and curator at Brooklyn Inc., an arts nonprofit located in Brooklyn, New York, on the unceded lands of the Munsee Lenape people. Brooklyn Calling was created to amplify the voices within the artist book field, but also to explore art making as a tool for community engagement and social justice. Today, our guest is Sofia Szamosi, who I'm very excited to talk to. Sofia is an artist who makes graphic novels, artist books, and zines. Her debut graphic novel, Unretouchable, was published by Graphic Universe in September of 2022 and tackles social media and image manipulation. She is currently working on her second graphic novel, a memoir about her adolescence in and out of the troubled teen industry. Sofia received her BA from NYU's Gallatin School for Individualized Study in 2017 and is obsessed with analog photo booths. Originally from New York City, she now lives in Massachusetts with her husband, her 2-year-old daughter, and their 3-toothed Pomeranian named Breakfast, who also happens to be a meme. Maybe we'll talk about that later. So, hi, Sofia. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are very happy to have you. We met quite a while ago, didn't we?
Yeah,
And I'm really interested in what your perspective was in terms of, those first few meetings at Brooklyn when you were kind of a fairly young zinester.
totally. I was trying to remember if I how I discovered you. I know that I came to Brooklyn on a field trip. I was taking an artist's book class at NYU, but I think I already knew you guys and was perhaps had already even started doing stuff with you before that. I am not remembering, but I think that must have been in 2015 or maybe 2016. And I just thought Brooklyn was incredibly cool, and it opened my eyes to a whole world that I really didn't know anything about. I am not really like in the zine world or the zine. I think it's amazing and I love it, but I'm just not really that in it. But Brooklyn kind of just introduced me to, I mean, I've always loved making books, and Brooklyn was the first time I saw how many ways you could make books and how many amazing, cool books are out there. And it was just a very exciting thing to discover.
So it's really interesting because we kind of have used you in kind of talking about zine making and artist book making and how zines are kind of like the gateway drug to artist books, which then
Totally.
becomes like this really whole obsessive relationship with the book and works on paper and all kinds of media. So I'm kind of really interested in like before Brooklyn, like you said, you were already kind of making books just kind of on your own, and you sort of have a little bit of a literary thing going in your family. So can you go like way back? Because you do a lot of sort of autobiographical stuff that reaches back into childhood. So I'm wondering if you can like go way back and, go to the very beginning, like the first zine book thing that you made.
Yes, totally. I love that zines are the gateway drug. I totally agree. I remember the first book, or one of the first books I made as a very small kid, was like a tiny book that was supposed to be like a mouse's book. And it was just, I loved, I don't know, I've always loved making things, and there's something I've always found very satisfying about making a book. Like putting all the individual pages together, binding them somehow, and then boom, you have this like cohesive object. And I think even as a little kid, I found that very pleasing. And yeah, I guess that just has it just sort of continued throughout my life. And I don't really remember what exactly made me do my I'm trying to remember like what the first zine I did was in my adulthood. I think it was like the girls series,
Hmm.
and that same thing, I just like found it really satisfying to put them together, bind them. And I love that as an artist, I've always been very sort of impulsive. Like I'll get inspired and I'll just have to do something. I don't want to necessarily wait to have all the perfect materials or like plan everything out. I've always just really enjoyed like following the inspiration, making it. And with a zine, you can just like pretty quickly make a a book and share it with people. And I think that just really attracted me to the medium.
So, what do you think it is? Like, a lot of people read books, and a lot of kids read books, and we're always kind of tossing books at children. And, childhood literacy is a really big deal. Um, at Booklyn, we often say that artist books are like children's books for adults. What do you think was the thing that made you go from like looking at books, reading books, to making books?
Hmm. That's a good question. And I love that you said artist books are children's books for adults because I love making children's books. Well, I love making picture books, and I have all these picture books that I've made over the years that I would love to one day publish or get published. And I'm always like, they're not totally super kiddie kids books. I just like thinking about picture books not just being for kids.
You said it was pleasure that kind of motivated you to make books, but I was just kind of trying to get a little more specific about because I wonder this about myself. Like, what was that thing that turns us from like a consumer to a producer, like from reading books to making books? And I wonder if there was a moment for you.
Hmm. I don't know because I really have always been very much a maker and a draw. I've always, ever since I was, tiny, I've loved drawing and making pictures and telling stories through my artwork. So I think that part of me has just always been pretty active. There was a period through my teens and early 20s where it kind of got like, was dormant for a little while. I was based on life stuff. I didn't have as active a practice, but um, around the time I started making zines and working with you guys is when it was really I was having the sort of like resurgence of my creativity, which was a really exciting time. I don't know exactly what made me want to make books versus just consume them, but yes, pleasure, satisfaction, and like a compulsion maybe to, share things and like share parts of myself. There's something very um like something very therapeutic. It can be very therapeutic to make a book or make a zine about something, especially personal stuff, and so I'm sure that's part of it too.
So I want to talk a little bit more about your zines, and then later I want to talk a little bit more about this gateway thing about how you went from zines to artist books to box sets and all those things.
Mhm.
But you did this really kind of amazing series when I first met you. It really struck me. It was interesting to me how kind of like the digital generations, the millennials, the generations, whatever, Z, X, Y, I don't know, the knots. It was interesting that you see all these younger people submerged in digital culture and social media. but never saw a lot of artists making work about that in other media. Whereas you were making all these great drawings and then all these great zines about Instagram. And I remember being so gravitated to your work because it was kind of like, finally, here's someone making work about social media outside of the medium of digital technology. I mean, that was super interesting to me. And it was kind of amplified by the fact that there was sort of a feminist aspect to it, or not really feminist, but like almost because there was a little bit of just a female identified solidarity. Like there wasn't like an ideological slant. It was just like, here's all this stuff going on social media, and I'm going to take a few steps back and portray it in drawings, and then distribute these drawings in zine form to these smaller communities. So it was like a minute kind of reflection of the giant millions of people online. And then there you are giving out your books about that. So I just wondered what feelings you have about that.
Well, thank you so much for appreciating that, and it makes me so happy. I don't think it was really thought out at all, but I have thought about it more over the years, especially because my graphic novel that just came, Touchable, is tackling social media and digital images as well, and I obviously drew that book, and I don't know. I think there's something about drawing, changing the medium, like drawing digital images with my hand, that kind of helps me to process them and see them differently and like change my relationship to them. And especially with all the girls on Instagram series, you know, finding these images and then drawing them. I mean, the honest truth is real reason I did it or started that series was just like a compulsion to do it. Like I found some of the images that I was seeing on social media so like either entertaining or disgusting or just like I was just finding some of the things I was seeing were so interesting to me that I just wanted to draw them. And in that process, I feel like I sort of was forced to go from maybe judgment or even insecurity or whatever to a place of more curiosity and intrigue or even appreciation. And that whole process, I mean, that's like one of the things I just like about drawing in general. You're really kind of learning something through like this way of looking at it that's just very specific to drawing.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about that kind of, physical versus, virtual digital representation, because it's just interesting to me. It's like you're using your body to do these drawings, and all these young women are using this digital interface to do things about their bodies. And it's kind of like an interesting filter. And I'm, so let's talk about girls and their food on Instagram specifically. Like, it seems like a really loaded kind of subject matter. And so I'm wondering if you could kind of like step it back to like your experience in, I guess you would say, researching and then doing the drawings and then kind of editing all that stuff, and what you were feeling and what you were thinking about in that process.
Totally. Well, yes, I would say I would agree with you. It was a little loaded. I actually, around that time, was just getting into recovery for eating disorders. So I think my interest and preoccupation with food was definitely related to that, although I wouldn't have necessarily connected it at the time, but now looking back, it's just notable. Um, but also, like, it's funny because I feel like it's sort of a slice of the moment because at the time, the whole phenomenon of posting food photos was, like, so ubiquitous on social media, like, social media was more about that than it was necessarily posting selfies. I mean, obviously, people were posting selfies then too, but a little less so than now, but and I think just the whole phenomenon of the food photos was more novel at that time to me, and and I was just interested in how gender was being sort of performed through food photos, and I just found them so sort of interesting, some of them cringy, and some of them really funny, and some of them really sort of weirdly revealing, and I just wanted to draw them.
So it's interesting because this is like a trope that you used. You have girls in their bodies, girls making faces, girls in their food on Instagram, which we're talking about, girls and their dogs on Instagram. And I think those are all kind of reflect previous pieces that you did. But one of the things we did after we met you is we were like, oh, let's make a box set of Sophia's Instagram books because again, just a way to framework how important we thought that critical perspective was. So I want to backtrack to get your feeling about that body of work and then your feelings about seeing these individual zines put into, the box set concept. And what was kind of great, again, about you specifically as an artist is you were so receptive to ideas. So, for a lot of people, it's like, okay, we think we should sell a box set of your zines because they all make sense, and people go like, yeah, okay, but you go, oh well, okay, then I'm gonna hand paint boxes for all these box sets. So it's just like kind of one step further. So tell us about all that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I so appreciated I and still today appreciate all ideas, and I loved the box set idea. I mean, in the same way that I love how satisfying a book with putting together pieces to make a book is very satisfying. Putting things in boxes is also satisfying, and I
And what could
really
be
just
better than making books and putting them into
I
boxes?
honestly, it is really the most satisfying, pleasurable thing to do. I had so much fun painting the boxes. I also I don't think I really knew when you guys told me about the phenomenon of box sets. I didn't really know. I didn't know exactly what that would look like, so I just sort of was like, well, I'm going to find boxes and paint them, and I just yeah, that's it was really fun. I did have like some mishaps. My first round of boxes that I painted, I like painted it on a bat. The boxes were not like good for holding paint, and all the paint just peeled off them. It was really mortifying. But besides that, it was just a really fun experience, and yeah, and interesting for me just to sort of look at my own work in that way as like a sort of a set and see the story that they were all telling together. It was definitely really interesting, and even more interesting now as time has passed and like the whole world of social media has just grown and evolved in the ways that it has. Like looking back, it now seems like this really interesting little slice of a moment.
So how do you feel about the Instagram series now and the girls in Instagram series now when you look back at that body of work and um, where you were when you did it and now at this perspective?
It's interesting because I don't think I would make a series now called Girls and Their Anything just because I don't refer to myself as a girl anymore. Like I do feel like I have become a woman. Whereas at the time, I very much would have said I was a girl. Like I also was aware, at the time that that word can be very pejorative, and I was using it sort of purposefully because I feel like I was showing a performance of girldom. And like social media is so much about that performance. Um, but like I said, I don't think I would make that today.
I thought it was interesting that you really portrayed in all those titles, you portrayed a really wide perspective of girls, young women, women, and kind of like all across cultural and ideological and, you know, spectrums. And, but what's interesting is you seem to have like a empathy, a sympathy with all of them. Like there was kind of an interesting, I don't know, respectful and even celebratory way that you kind of depicted because they're basically portraits, right? I mean, um, it's all about that self-referentiality, and I'm wondering if how purposeful that was, or are you just like a nice person, or was this a strategy, or
No,
how
I'm
that
definitely
worked?
not a nice person, but I do feel like there's something like in drawing back to the whole process of drawing someone or drawing something. There is something for me that is inherently respectful, and in my collecting, like as I would research and look for these images, I was choosing images that I thought were interesting or that I was drawn to in some way. So, there is an inherent like respect or whatever there. Um and I definitely was kind of, I mean, obviously these are not like, I'm not an anthropologist or anything, but I was definitely trying to sort of create a collection that was like a sample of many different ways of being on social media.
Right, because you're definitely documenting this phenomenon, right? And
Mhm.
because it is all categorical phenomenon. You know, girls
Mhm.
and their dogs was a thing, right?
Yes.
Girls in their bodies was a thing and always will be a thing,
Yeah.
probably. Girls making faces was an actual thing. Like for
Yeah.
some of these categories, there were like really specific moments.
Mhm.
But you also kind of traveled with this stuff in terms of both in terms of subject and material form, because you start with these zines, you go into these box sets, and you had kind of a parallel kind of career as a painter and worked in other media, but you were also, I mean, I think you did painted books along when you were doing the zines. You were doing
Yes.
the manipulations of children's books. So
Yes.
maybe you can talk about because I think we use you as this kind of like linear example, like the gateway um, zine thing. But in
Mhm.
reality, you were always kind of working in different approaches
Mhm.
in terms of the book form. So
Mhm.
talk about that a little.
Yeah, I also the painted books. I've always, I think I was making painted books at the same time as zines, and painted books being like a more one of a kind object. And there have been some things I've made that, like, I've made some painted books that I have then reproduced as zines, so there's definitely some crossover. And I love making painted books. I actually just finished one that I'm very excited about. It's called Weird is Wonderful, and it's a picture book about, it's an ABC picture book, and each page is just like, A, awkward is awesome. B, bizarre is beautiful. C, curious is cute, and so on.
I immediately think of your affirmations book, for instance, where it's all the different kind of portraits and of these, and it's maybe not the book that people think it is.
Mhm.
I but I kind of don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
But you could go on Booklyn.org's website and look for Sofia Savosi's Affirmations book, and again, you might be surprised. But there is something about the affirmative nature of a lot of your work. Um, maybe a little bit of dark positivity. I don't know, pessimistic optimism. Uh, but I want to go back a little um, to the girl series because you kind of stayed with that for a while, and you uh, after the zines, you did the Me Too on Instagram book, which kind of referred to all those subject matters that the zines took on, but you did that as kind of a limited edition artist book where you were up in the ante and making a screen printed book. So, talk about that.
Yes, that was so fun and such a cool experience. I had never screen printed anything, and I physically did not do the screen printing, but I had a wonderful, talented friend help me with that part, and it was just so cool to learn about the whole process and watch it come together. And yeah, I mean, I the that book is a collection of illustrations based on Instagram posts from October 2018, so like a year after the Me Too movement really um, went crazy, and all posts that had been tagged with the hashtag Me Too, and the illustrations were like very sort of simplified graphical renditions of the posts, and then on the adjacent page would be the caption the that the user had posted. And yeah, I mean, I was just really interested in how that movement sort of was expressing itself on social media, and how the phenomenon of how movements can sort of just become everything, like that hashtag, what obviously started out as like a sort of um rallying cry, had sort of morphed into tons of stuff. There would be like people posing with Pepsi cans, and then there would be people marching, and then there would be someone smoking a bong, and like just everything with the hashtag Me Too. And I found that really interesting.
The spectrum that you illustrate is, in some ways, just kind of wild, right? I mean, there's like overtly anti feminist statements in the guise of critiquing Me Too. There's statements that you just can't even figure out what's going on. And there is kind of also militant feminist statements. And um, how when you went back, kind of brought the girl thing forward to look, because there's an interesting relationship, kind of like girl to women politics. Um, when you step back and look at Me Too on Instagram in relationship to all the other earlier zines, what do you see in terms of those bodies of work?
I definitely see a progression, and I like that girl to woman thing. I mean, I see definitely a sort of deeper looking, like obviously the girls series was less political, and uh they're definitely related, but the Me Too one is an evolution, definitely.
So I want to go back because this thing about groupings, like we kind of, there's so many different pieces that you've made a lot of work. I mean, as an artist, you're actually pretty prolific in various media. But I remember at one point, and I'm not sure at what point in this kind of history, we did the Everything box set. where we had, I think it was about 18 of your zines, and and they went really far back, right? You had some really early stuff that you had reprinted. You had all the some new stuff, and then you even had the one zine for Unretouched that you had to remove. And so, talk about the Everything box set.
Yeah, that was also so much fun. Just like it was really, I feel like I've said satisfying too many times, but very satisfying to see my whole body of work, all my zines together. Really cool. Just as an artist to have that, and I still have both of my box sets are on my mantle still in my living room. So like I do feel proud of them. And actually, the my everything set has grown substantially since the 18 zines that you have, because I've continued to add to my personal um, set. And, like it's kind of nice. I kind of enjoy putting them all together because there are some zines, you know, the zines that I may not be as excited about, or maybe think like as time has passed, I'm like, oh, that one was lame. It's like, who cares? It's in the everything set. I can just sort of accept it as part of a body of work, which I like.
So, talk about Rat Shoe.
I love Rat Shoe. I guess the first thing I can say about it is it is a story that I heard from someone else. So I do in Rat Shoe I am telling a story about witnessing a woman step on a rat in Chinatown with like a stiletto heel and the heel going straight through the rat. And I'm speaking in the first person, but I did not actually witness that. That was an anecdote that I heard from someone else, but it had always stuck with me. And I kind of, when hearing it, it was such a strong image. And I always just kind of wanted to make a book of it, and that's what Rat Shoe is. And it's painted with watercolors.
So, do you think that's an urban legend, or the anecdote was from someone who saw it really?
The anecdote was from someone who saw it really, but let's just say it really happened because I want to believe that it did. And actually, that is a good example of something that started as a painted book, because the original Rat Shoe was a painted book in the Lil book set that you guys had. And then I reproduced it as a zine. So that's Rat Shoe. Maybe one day it will become a graphic novel.
There you go. So let's fast forward to now, and let's talk about Unretouchable. You know, which I know as a book that was in the original Everything box set, which was removed because of a publishing agreement. So um, it's a great trajectory, right? Like the zines, the painted books, the box sets, the screen printed limited editions, and then blam, now the trade publication. So let's talk about the whole life of Unretouchable.
Yes, it's been so cool to watch Unretouchable evolve from the zine that I made in 2016. So I made this zine. I was doing an internship at NYU with a photo retoucher, like learning about photo retouching. And he, was technically he was called a digital imaging specialist. So he would do all the tech on photo shoots for like fashion stuff. And then he would also do photo retouching. And so I was doing this internship and I had to produce like a final project. And so I decided to make a zine because that was like my preferred medium at the time. And I made this zine, which was basically just like my illustrated musings about the creation of unrealistic beauty standards and digital images and advertising. And while I was doing the internship, I actually got so alienated by the whole world of digital images that I quit social media, and I like became obsessed with just like quote unquote unretouchable art and experiences. And I was sort of, this was like where my head was at the time. And so I made this zine, and I remember like cutting and pasting the original zine together on my kitchen floor, which was like the biggest floor space I had at the time, and just like putting this thing together and then taking it to the copy shop. And it was just a very like fun, physical, tangible experience. And then I can't remember how much later I ended up sharing that zine with my agent. So I have an agent who is uh who was very at that time really I hadn't published anything. This is my first like thing that's published in the world. And she really liked the zine, and she was like, this could be a graphic novel. I feel like this could be a YA graphic novel. And I had never thought of doing any YA stuff at all, but I was very open to her idea, and I did like the idea of it being something that could be, um, I liked the idea of making something for young people. And so then I had the process of having to basically take the zine and turn it into a story that could work as a graphic novel. So I basically fictionalized my experience and created a fictional protagonist named Olive, who is 18 and about to start her first semester at college and doing this internship as a summer internship. And then, um, so yeah, I wrote the script, and then I did the artwork. The whole process of like from writing the script to the finished artwork was like 2 years. So it was very not a zine. It took a long time. And and that was really interesting because like it was the first time I've had to really sit with something. I mean, I have worked on projects that I've taken years on, but like nothing like this. This was a totally new thing for me. And um really, really interesting to, I mean, I also like realized I don't actually love fiction that much. The original zine was a personal essay about my experiences, and it was hard for me having to fictionalize it and make it something else. And so actually that's why my current project is a graphic memoir, which is just I'm much more comfortable speaking from my own experience. I don't want to make it sound like a zine is any less of a book than a book that's published by a publisher and in a bookstore. I mean, a zine is its own amazing, wonderful thing in itself. It's not like the zine is the lowly zine and like aspires to be an amazing book one day. I don't think that's not what I think at all, but it's just cool to have seen it change and evolve, and I still love the original zine that I made.
Well, I love that you are um, just kind of an illustration of all these possibilities. Although I'm kind of like, wait, your agent? Let's roll back to that. Um, talk about your agent and how that came to be.
The way the agent came to be, unfortunately, is nepotism. I think you mentioned earlier, I have a literary family. So I have a grandmother who's like a really renowned historian, and she's just turned 94. She's like still working. She's an incredible person, Natalie Zeman Davis. And she has an agent because she's published like 1,000 books. And when I was she's always been incredibly supportive of me. And when she knew I was like making a lot of zines and stuff, she was very supportive and was like, oh, you should talk to my agent. And not necessarily even thinking that it would, just for advice and a meeting. And the agent, Jennifer Welts, really loved my work and was just like, "This is cool," you know, and she at the time, because I met her with just, like, a box of zines, so I didn't have, like, any book pitches or anything, I just had, like, "Here's all my zines," you know, and I think she was kind of like, "Okay, like, you know, these are cool, but I don't necessarily have any, like, great leads for you." But then when I showed her Unretouchable, I think that's when she was like, "Oh, this actually could be a graphic novel, you know, could you make a pitch? Like, could you kind of put something together?" And so that's how it happened. But yeah, nepotism.
Well, genetics. Maybe there's like a reading DNA thing going on or something like that.
Maybe.
But back to kind of, um, this coherence of your work in terms of looking at issues of body image, for instance. This goes through a lot of your work, and I know it's a hard subject matter, and I know it's personal and historical and of interest to you. But when since we've been talking and I'm looking at all your titles and I'm thinking about all these books, it really is kind of major, sometimes an undercurrent and sometimes really a focus of a lot of your work. So I'm wondering if you think of that as kind of, um, you know, like a strategy, a concern.
Very much so. I mean, I also am not sure if I would have, like, it's not like I would necessarily be thinking it throughout making all these things, but I definitely see it as a common theme that I'm very interested in and still to this day interested in. I mean, I mentioned I have a history of eating disorders, and just like the whole process of going from a little kid to becoming a girl and a woman and growing up and, and being a woman body in this world, and and like now, I have a 2-year-old, so like obviously my body has transformed in amazing ways, and it's just something I'm very interested in.
So has your perspective changed? Will your child become part of your audience? Like, how do you see, is there changes in terms of, again, these trajectories, these kind of like circling around things, these life experiences?
Oh yeah, I mean, my perspective changes all the time. I'm constantly changing my perspective. I'm very interested in um I'm sure that I definitely don't see this interest going anywhere. I'm sure I'm going to be making art about body image and changing bodies, and the evolving way I feel about my body, for a long time. And I go from feeling terrified for my daughter to feeling inspired and darkly positive. um I obviously, the whole world of social media just, is so can be so damaging for young women, and I'm truly terrified for what it's going to be like when she's old enough to be on it. Um but I also feel like hopefully she will have grown up watching me, you know processing it and making art about it and questioning it and talking about it, and hopefully hopefully I'll be able to keep it a conversation so that it's something that we talk about and look at critically.
But I guess it's hard not to think about the correlation of these issues of representation with the issues of actual power. So we're kind of in this, you know, um, this whole post Roe versus Wade world where we have these glaring, nightmares of the Taliban in Afghanistan and what's going on in Iran, and even the whole Handmaiden's Tale fictional universe that reflects that. And yet, again and again, we're seeing young women in the center of this, um, you know, universe of conflict. And so, um, not to put you in any position of a spokesperson, or as, I mean, you're not telling everyone's story here. I mean, I don't think of you as an overtly political artist, but you kind of have found like I feel like a lot of your work kind of like pokes at really sensitive places. And I guess I'm wondering um, how intentional that is, how intuitive that is, and how you feel your various audiences have reacted to that.
Well, yeah, I definitely think poking at sensitive places is my specialty. I mean, I feel like, w- when I'm thinking about what I want to make, I, the things that I want to make are things that are uh, sort of cringy or, I think Spitwall is a good example because, so Spitwall is a painted book I made about my teenage bedroom where I used to spit on the walls, and I had a wall in my bedroom that was like my spit wall. And this story, every time this would come up with my old friends from adolescence, I would like turn beet red and feel super embarrassed and like horrified, like, oh my God, I can't believe I had a spit wall. Like, how disgusting is that? But people would always laugh. And I sort of, as the years went by, I sort of started to see the story as, you know, less cringy and horrifying and more funny and weird and sort of interesting. And that was like something that, and then I felt really inspired to make this book about it. And I guess I'm bringing that up as an example because it is, it was a way for me to um, process something. It was exploring something that was very personal and it was a dark time in my life. Um, and in making this piece of art about it and sharing it with people, I was sort of like processing it and changing it somehow. And obviously, like sharing your personal experience is really important, and it can be really healing.
I can tell you that some of the reactions to Spitwall, just people were completely perplexed. Like, I mean, and some people were like, "Oh yeah, Spitwall, yeah," and then other people were like, "A what? A what? What? No." Like some people could not believe that this was in any way autobiographical, and it seemed like other people were like, "Oh yeah, I had a Spitwall." People really gravitate to. There's something about your work where there's like a simplicity, um, in terms of what seems like the aesthetic choices, the kind of the portraiture, but it's interesting, uh, especially with Me Too on Instagram. Boy, a lot of people and a lot of female identified people really like that book, and you could see their immediate engagement with it. And that was always really interesting to me. And I guess it's what made me gravitate towards your work. The fact that it was both at one level it was really accessible, and then at another level it seems like what is going on here. So I really liked that conflict, and I'm wondering if that's something that you feel or noticed, or again, is this an intentional kind of aesthetic strategy?
No, not really intentional. I don't think I'm not necessarily thinking about it as I'm drawing or painting or whatever, but I do think that when I think when I'm doing my best work, it is accessible.
It seems like there's places where your work often goes that is more complicated than it looks, and it's
Yes.
a little mysterious. And like I said, it's the pokey, like
Mhm.
the little needle prick kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess that would be the dark positivity. That's the dark part. I mean, I definitely, like I said, have there's a part of me that wants to tell on myself and to maybe confess, and um so maybe that's kind of what you're picking up on. Like, there's I have this impulse to talk about maybe difficult things in my work. And it's actually interesting because, as I mentioned before, I had the realization that I really do prefer writing from my experience versus writing fiction, because I'm like I said, I'm working on my second book, and I've been also trying to figure out what my third book is going to be. And I've been kind of coming up with all these different ideas, and in many ways it would be very sensible for me to make a another YA graphic novel. So I had been thinking, okay, well, like, what work of fiction could I come up with? And realizing, like, wow, I really do love memoirs. I love talking from my own experience.
Well, I think it's a
Yeah.
pretty consistent part of your work, right? I mean, if we go back and we look at the photo booth self-portraits, for instance,
Mhm.
like this constant reflection of yourself, this constant
Mhm.
reflection of yourself, and then we can even kind of fast forward to, you know, the your participation in the Brooklyn Bridge uh, project, which is a limited edition book of 21 different collaged books that 21 different artists participate in. And the way you participated was to give 21 collages that kind of illustrate 21 pages from your diary when you were 21. And of course, this is a book that people are only going to be able to see in like rare books or special collections libraries or museum libraries or maybe an exhibit. But I've been reading all those diary, and they're really intense and they're really personal. And so it's almost kind of like that. Again, I'm going to put this out in the world, for this, for a controlled audience, but I'm watching people because the book is available, and we're up to number 7 now. 6 of them are in public collections, and it's been on display, and I'm like watching people read your diaries. And they're pretty intense, and they're very honest, and they're very open, and they're almost like the raw material for all the rest of your work. And again, that speaks to this coherence. And I don't know. I think you need to, like, I see, like, your whole life could be fiction, right? I mean, people try to write fiction that's as good as other people's lives. So maybe you're already there. Maybe you've just lived this life that has, because again, I think we could go line to line from your diaries and say, like, oh, yeah. Um,
Mm.
that line and golden bottles, that scene, or that line and girls and their dogs on Instagram. Um, but what's great is it shows kind of your generosity, and it shows to me that coherence in your production and that kind of constant reflection. Like you're not just seeing yourself reflected in the mirror, but it's like you're seeing other, um, primarily women, girls, female identified people, but not always. Just,
Mm.
this idea of how many reflections can go through the, the fun house of life, I guess.
Mm. That's very well put. Yeah, I was, like, turning red while you were talking about that because it is I mean, I definitely took comfort knowing that, like, not a ton of people would be reading them, and also no one would be reading them all together except for maybe you. But, yeah, I love that project.
Yeah, it's funny how in the artist book world, in this book world, there are these little kind of secret worlds, and it's I've had a great time working with you at Bookland. It's really been a great experience, and I think everyone at Bookland has liked your work. One last question, and then I'm going to get let you have the last word. Um, so, how is the graphic novel doing? Like, how is Unretouchable doing? Like, what's the chatter?
So it came out very recently in September, and it got a ton of really, really good press, in the very beginning. And I have no idea how it's doing. I don't really know when I get to find out, like when I will get a royalties statement or anything, but
Right.
it did win some uh, award that like meant that a bunch of copies would be purchased for schools and libraries. So that was really exciting.
Wow,
And
congratulations.
yeah, so that was cool. And yeah, I mean, it's very strange putting something out into the world in this way and having to like market myself on social media, which is like very weird when like the book in a lot of ways is a critique on social media. And I, as a person, hate social media so much. And yet I have to like engage on it for this book. It was a very, very interesting experience.
Well, great, Sophia. Great, Sophia. Congratulations. I'm going to give you the last word, so go ahead.
Well, I guess I will say I just want to express true gratitude to you, Marshall, and to Brooklyn. You guys are so cool. I tell anyone I can about you as often as possible, and I love all the work that you guys do. And you've just been such hugely influential supporters of me for so long now, and I'm very grateful. And yeah, keep an eye out for, I think I told you about my new zine, Nipstagram, which is
Yeah.
actually an interesting, um, like continuation to the from the girls to the Me Too, definitely belongs in the social me box set. And so yeah, keep your eyes out for that.
Well, Sophia, thank you so much, for your work, for working with Bookland, and congratulations on the new book.
Oh,
And
thank you.
we're excited about Nipstagram and all the rest of your work. Folks can always learn more about you at bookland.org. Just look for Sofia Zamosi. And then I guess we're not going to give them any of your social media handles since you hate
No, no,
that.
no. So Sophia Samosi is my Instagram, and my name www.sophiasamosi.net, net, not com, is my website.
Great. So, people, check that out. And thank you again. And thanks, everybody out there, for listening to Bookland Calling. And we'll see you next time.
This podcast was made possible in part by funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs and in partnership with the City Council, and from individual donors to Bookland Inc. You can support this podcast by making a donation at bookland.org/donate.